So welcome to the Pure Scientology Please podcast, episode 5. I want to just start by saying that I find it really annoying whenever I hear online content that states like officially how L. Ron Hubbard practiced scam art theory, and I don't think he did. I mean, day in and day out, we're dealing with being scammed. We get scammed by our friends. We get scammed by youth, coworkers, the phone company right now. I'm getting scammed by my phone company. It's my own personal problem, but I think just sort of brazenly saying that L. Ron Hubbard had this like scam background or like a theory of scamming people and like all the conniving sometimes we hear talked about. I am bucking against that internally, and there are a couple podcasts or series that do speak to people who worked with him, but very, very few. And I've read L. Ron Hubbard's books, and I really enjoy auditing. So what I am getting at is that today's podcast is about Grant Cardone, and I will admit that I have not read Grant Cardone's books, and I won't ever read Grant Cardone's books. I feel like I have to say that because I am compelled to call Grant Cardone like the biggest con artist of all time. And then I'm sitting here thinking, don't do what annoys you about people calling Hubbard a con artist, because that's not very fair. So I am here in Oregon, and Grant, I think, is based out of Hollywood and Florida and Texas and other places. I'm not quite sure where he operates from, but it's a rainy day here in Oregon, and we're going to launch into Grant Cardone. But I don't think that anyone should say anything is a con game until they really get into it. So I'm not going to like vouch for the validity of Cardone's sales practices versus Hubbard's approach to life. I'm an artist myself. I'm a writer, and I'm a visual artist, and I was in different drama clubs, and I directed 2 plays. And, when you do these sorts of things, you end up with a little like sliver of celebrity experience, and you start to get an idea, wow, if you multiplied that by like, a whole town knowing who you are, or like the whole world knowing who you are, it could get pretty tough, right? To keep up with everybody and remember like all your business deals at every venue you performed at, or let's say every like movie you were ever in, all the connections that you make. It's a lot to deal with, plus your fan base, plus making money, plus your family. So I also have worked with a lot of influential artists, celebrity type people, starting with when I was working at Celebrity Center in 1998, and I was working at the Church of Scientology until 2019. And more recently, I have worked with artists and celebrities. I have a publication called National Sounds Music Journal, and it has a focus on the missing human rights conversation in the music industry. So my obsession is talking about human rights, especially in areas where business is like becoming more important than human life. And I like people to stay alive. So I think Hubbard did too. But did Grant Cardone? I'm going to tell you about my experiences with Grant Cardone. I'm going to just go rat-a-tat through it so you can hear my saga. And I'm going to take off this coat because it's making a lot of noise. Yeah, I guess I feel like we could certainly redirect this attack on L. Ron Hubbard as a big scam artist, because Hubbard passed away in like 1986. Like 40 years have gone by. So who exactly is profiting? I mean, we're seeing shows in 2026 about like how Hubbard's this and Hubbard's that and profiting. And I would just have to guess that Hubbard probably did live a really like hard ass you know, constrained life, because it was his fame, you know, started in the 30s in New York, and he didn't have the internet. So if he started to get a reputation of one way or another, or, you know, if he did, like, let's say somebody funded a book project and it went nowhere, sometimes these claims against artists are just because, you know, the guy who gave the money for the movie, or he gave the money for the script or the book didn't pan out. He wanted the artist to pay him back. The artist had no money because he didn't even, you know, believe that such a thought process could actually exist, you know, where, like, if the audience didn't like it and the money wasn't made, why would he have to pay back the guy who put the money out for the show? I'm trying to express that I've read Ron's books and I think they're great. The auditing procedure is really detailed. It's helped me a lot. So I think he put out enough, like, actual physical items that we could stop saying that Ron is like a part of, like, the Con Artist Association of the Galaxy, because it always sounds like there's this, like, undercurrent of, like, horrible, like, aspirations, and, like, a cauldron is bubbling, like, in the back room. And I'm certain that's not the case, because the books are good, and there's like 100 books, and there's a whole bunch of lectures, and then there's a whole bunch of procedures, and a lot of people like them. That said, there are con games attached to this organization, but there's con games attached to your phone bill, and my phone bill right now. So, and I recently did a post about a trip I took to New York, and every time I got, like, dinged on there's places when you're driving along, you know, between, like, upstate New York and, let's say, Washington DC, and if they don't allow you to, like, pull over and pay for your toll, you get a $50 penalty for just being there whatsoever. So I had, like, 3 years ago, gotten one of the little things that you put on your window, and I had it up there, but since I hadn't used it in over a year, the money had already gotten refunded to some card. It was actually, somebody had bought the thing for me to use, so the money was already refunded to the person who bought it, and I didn't even know. So all I'm saying is that you cannot pull over on a lot of these toll roads in the eastern part of the United States and pay at all. They just have a buffet of lights that, like, take your picture as you're going through. And then you get, like, all these things in the mail, and I have, like, tolls that the $50 charges are, like, in the $400, and the actual tolls are like $120, and you cannot just pay the tolls. So while I'm, like, arguing for my right to be treated without a $50 charge for every single time I went through one of these buffet of lights, with no way to actually pull over and pay the $11 or the $3, you know, $2. So I have these charges and I'm arguing against them, but they won't accept the actual payment of the toll itself. So seems like a petty battle, but I feel bad for everybody on the East, and anybody who visits and gets treated this way. So I get into these arguments on behalf of myself completely and totally, and also on behalf of the people that are too bored to, like, you know, petition for some sort of change in the government there and get it responsible for the actual, like, income level of people, and also to promote that I return to the eastern part of the United States. Blah, blah, blah. Here we go. So Grant Cardone, I first encounter Grant Cardone when I am working at Celebrity Center International, and I started there in 1998, and during the time I was there, I had probably 9 real, like, intense episodes with Dave Pettit, the commanding officer, telling him that I absolutely did not want to be there and I wanted to leave, and, you know, went through all of the different reasons why I couldn't be there on my own determinism, and that, you know, the entire circumstance leading up to me working in the Church of Scientology was without my choosing, and probably shouldn't have gotten into wanting him to help me with my mother being just endlessly attacked through the Church of Scientology very illegally by creeps. And I probably gave him way too much information about my background and what had been happening with the Delphian School, especially since one of the senior most people was Tiffany Ott, who was the daughter of the then headmaster of the Delphian School, and then later her brother Trevor Ott became the headmaster. But she's in the Celebrity Center Network and Scientology since 1997, and really illegally there. She is not qualified to be there at all, based on her illegal behavior towards other girls and other paying students at the Delphian School, for which she never took responsibility for her actions, not even a single time. And I say that knowing that because Tiffany believes in this very, very erroneous, false application of their made-up version of Scientology, which is that if you ever say you did anything wrong, then you are like a wimp, or you're going to get your decisions to make things happen aren't going to work. And that is just something that somebody made up, or Tiffany herself made up. But the truth is that honestly relaying, your past errors to a trained Scientology practitioner who is sworn to keep the data totally to themselves would enable someone to then properly evaluate why they did the things that they did and then make a change. So con artists, right? So then you have basically Tiffany has conned all of the executives she's ever worked with into thinking that she is an asset to this organization, when she is the worst person who has ever been hired ever in the history of the Church of Scientology, because she never is going to leave. If she left, she would be faced with an incredible amount of debt and people that would actually be able to sue her. So we have this terrible scenario where a woman who we all witnessed doing illegal activities at the Delphian School in Sheridan, Oregon, is permitted to just sort of camp out inside the Church of Scientology, make up policy, deride church staff members, and blah, blah, blah. This isn't about her, but she is the senior executive over the Church of Scientology Celebrity Center and Dave Pettit at the time that Grant Cardone comes strolling in. So Grant comes into the Celebrity Center, and what was really striking about him is that he brought these 2 dogs with him when dogs weren't allowed on the property, 2 large dogs, and carried them around with his leash, and they were just everywhere he went. And so it sort of flaunted, the policies of the organization, which you could say is well, why isn't it dog friendly? And I don't know why it isn't dog friendly. And maybe it should be dog friendly. After all, dogs are great. I have dogs. I love my dogs. But a little hard to take when no one else can have their dog there. The other thing is that he had this really tight relationship with the president of the church at the time, and her name was Maria Ferrara. And Maria was really important to the entire Scientology community because she was there when Celebrity Center really took root, and she was an important person in putting together the magazine for the Church of Scientology Celebrity Center, which is called Celebrity Magazine. So she, knew all the celebrities, and she was just a really hardworking individual. So we see, Grant, he's staying in the hotel permanently. He's got this really close connection to Maria. And then, unfortunately, Maria takes ill, and she can't be on staff. So she goes out of the next, Maria takes ill, and she is sick. So she can't remain in the C organization anymore. The C organization has this very intense schedule. We're up at 8:30 in the morning. We work till 11:15 at night. Most of us work well past that to midnight, 1 a.m. And security is prowling around the space, which is just something, again, somebody made up and started doing, and nobody said stop doing that. That is pointless. We are all adults. And it's kind of evidence that perhaps some people really didn't want to be there, and also evidence that perhaps somebody knew something, and somebody that was keeping this security team really was targeting certain staff so that they couldn't leave strategically, is what it looked like to me. Because why the heck would you have a security team securitying the staff members themselves. Totally bozo scenario. Maria, close friends with Grant Cardone. Grant arrives. Everyone's kind of like, who's this Grant Cardone fellow, right? And then Grant and Maria are great friends. And then Maria is out of Celebrity Center, and she resurfaces a while later for me, and she suddenly has quite some money to pay for her medical costs, and she ends up getting a house. Her daughter also departs Scientology, and she ends up with a home, and her daughter's husband, Ian, is well financed, and it's all very vague how they ended up with these vast sums of money. Question is, was the money coming from Grant Cardone? If it was, then that is an illegal structure to the church, because these people, when they departed, were able to stay closely connected to the church and do like their upper levels at Flag. Her daughter got a house in Clearwater, or Ian had a house in Clearwater through his relationship with Maria's daughter. So I don't keep up on all the details, but they were able to pay for a huge amount of medical costs out of their own pocket. And so this brings up 2 points. One is that I have had medical scenarios that needed to be dealt with throughout my whole life that were never addressed due to no financing. So even when you hear these like numbers being thrown around, like, oh, Grant Cardone's bragging that he gave $18 million to the Church of Scientology, well, none of that came to the average church staff member in any of these churches. And even our medical costs that were supposed to be covered weren't covered, even during these huge moments of fundraising where the amount of money being reported that was being given into the Church of Scientology coffers was like 1,500 times what it had ever been prior to the early 2000s. And so the question I always had is, one, is the money actually being donated, or do we have people like Grant Cardone who say, hey, I walked through your library, put me on the, tick me up on the dry erase board for another $1 million because I'm just so special, right? Or was the money actually given and then just squandered on something that most of us never actually got to take any part in? So I never had my medical covered, and my parents actually covered it, and they really were atrociously in debt after associating with the Delphian school and the Ott family, just horrible situation there. So they never recovered from that. To this day, have not recovered to it. It's a miracle that my parents aren't deceased with the amount of incredible harassment that they dealt with as a result of having stepped foot on that into this very ugly scenario in Sheridan, Oregon. But I'm very thankful that they are still around, because I love them both. So back to Grant. So the first thing is, Grant arrives early 2000s, best friends with Maria. Maria's been there for decades, and suddenly Maria's gone. She's financially capable, like none of her peers are, and Grant is still there. So the next thing that happens is that Grant wants to date Elena, his current wife, Elena Cardone, and Elena has this woman that's sort of like her handler on the base. Her name is Joyce Wallace, and Joyce Wallace is also a friend or a business associate for Milton Katselis at the Beverly Hills Playhouse. And Milton was a friend, I believe, of Yvonne Gents, who started Celebrity Center. And he had, there were rumors that he spent, Hubbard had interviewed him for his experiences concerning art when Hubbard was researching the subject of art for a series that he wrote called the Art Series. And while I was at Celebrity Center, I spent 7 years working as the field staff member in charge, and Milton himself had contacted 546 different individuals over a period of about 20 to, well, my computer system, I think, went back to the 90s. So I think that's how far back it went, 94. So that was 546 since then, but he was also talking to people about Scientology before then. So all I'm trying to get at is that this man had dedicated a lot of time to talking to people about Scientology, and he felt pretty passionate about it himself. And Ron had felt that he trusted him enough to talk to him, right? To say, we at least thought Milton was an artist, right? So that was something. But Grant did not think that Milton was worth anything. So Grant wanted Elena. Elena was a member of the Beverly Hills Playhouse, and this long saga, sexual saga, starts to play out regarding Grant's penis and whether Elena, like all this stuff, okay? And it gets into other people, other stories, and suddenly Milton is going to be the target of the reason why Elena can't just like solidly commit to Grant Cardone. So Grant is using his sway in Scientology to basically just say, I want every single person who ever had a thought about Milton to go to the school and get that school like under my control. So he is able to use his money and his connection to the president's office at Celebrity Center to get hundreds of his students to quit. And that is pure hell. I mean, anyone who's had a company can you imagine that happening, where you have been working in acting schools since like the 80s or something, or the 70s, and it's now the early 2000s, and you have this person making a concerted effort to basically get rid of all of your life's work. And I think Milton was in his 70s by then. So I'm working in the field control area, and the president's office exerts a lot of control over the lives of celebrities that we are not privy to. So what happened is this. One day, Pamela, who was my boss, comes into our office, which is located on the ground floor, Division 6C, and she looks strange, and she walks across the room and she sits down, and I can feel this like heaviness in the air that she wants to say something. But I have this whole checklist that I do every day, and I'm not really going to get into it. You know, I'm just trying to get through it. I have to talk to like 30 people every day. I have to process these checklists of people who brought people in, verify the work that was done in order to pay them $1.65 or a $9 check. And some of the checks are larger, but that's the majority of them are these small checks that have to get verified that the person actually arrived and started and they're doing well on their courses. So, I tell you that also just to sort of verify that there's a lot of people that are part of this staff team whenever someone's in the church taking courses, and all of us are supposed to be alert to anything that is fishy. So Pamela walks across the room, has a seat, and says, turns around in her swivel chair, and she says, Milton is going to die. And I said, okay. It was said with such definition or definite purpose that it was like she was reading the menu for the day, like, it's 6 o'clock, you know, that's when that happens. So I said, well, when? And she said, today or tomorrow. So I said, how do you know this? And she said, I just was in the president's office for like a briefing with whoever, that he's like gonna die. So this was the first I'd heard of that. We had heard that, you know, a number of people were staying with Milton at the Playhouse, and a number of people were leaving. And then was Elena with Grant, or was Grant mad at Milton? And were these other people that were like Grant supporters, staunch, you know, private investigators going into Milton's business to like give them detailed reports? Just a lot of stuff that is so upsetting, you know, so incredibly upsetting. I weep for Milton right now. He did not have a fair chance he was never even asked publicly to speak on his own behalf. And that is incorrect. And so what happened was she said that, and I sat there and I looked at the wall because I faced a wall, and I looked out the window because there was a window over there, and I just got up and I went to, lied to everyone and said I was going to go on some task out of the building that didn't need to be done. And I got Milton's address from the computer system, and I drove to his house, and I knocked on the door, and his girlfriend of long duration, I think her name was Marianne, opened the door, and I said, I'm here to see Milton. And she looked kind of shocked. And I said, I'm here to give him a message that he has been a really great person for the Church of Scientology Celebrity Center. And so she let me come through, and there were some people standing in the kitchen, and she directed me to the room that Milton was inside of. And I walked in, and it was his bedroom, and there was a very artful looking bed. Everything in the place was incredibly like artful and beautifully designed. You know, he was a true artist, and he was sitting in his bed, and he was sitting up, and he was really checked out for all intents and purposes. I had asked if he had had a stroke, and she said no, not that we know of. So when I talked to him, he seemed like he could see me, but he couldn't talk. And I asked if he had been receiving assists, and I was told that he had an assist auditor. So I sat next to him, and I told him these like 3 paragraphs I'd been repeating to myself on the car ride from 5930 Franklin Avenue, across the street from, Mayfair, Gelson's Market, down Franklin Avenue to Hollywood. And, it was really sad. And I said what I said, and I basically said, thank you for all of your hard work, and you were a real friend to L. Ron Hubbard, and your work was really, really appreciated, and you should know that. In case that helps you feel better, in case it helps you recover at all. And he was, even though he was sitting up in an upright position and he was looking at me like this, he was not speaking at all. So after a couple minutes passed, I thought, if anybody from the president's office knows I'm here, they're gonna get upset. So I got up and left, and I went back to Celebrity Center, and I felt like I had done the work that L. Ron Hubbard would have expected to be done on behalf of Milton. Especially in light of the fact that all of the bad news that was being just sort of swished around the organization, like, bad spilled cocktails in the hallway, that all of that had been really uninvestigated, and he deserved a better shot. And I don't know if he died that day or if he died in the next few days. We didn't hear about him passing for a little while, because I remember asking for a few times what had happened to him, and then we were informed that he had passed away. So that was Grant with Milton. Then and the Beverly Hills Playhouse. Then later, when I was the president in the Church of Scientology of Nashville in 2010, Grant was asked to come out and perform a lecture, and we had a room full of 76 people who had all paid $50 to do a course together in a group that morning, and then they were listening to Grant. During that whole presentation, Grant spoke very little about his knowledge of the actual tenets of Scientology, and instead he informed everybody about how many women he had slept with, thousands and thousands of women, and he told this joke about burning wood and all these different variations of this joke about burning wood. And I'm just listening to that as the president, and Grant has attested to the state of clear, and he's not behaving in the ethics level that are required for someone who has attested to that state. And yes, it is required that a person not only get personal benefit from these levels in Scientology, but they are also then required to work hard at bringing a higher level of knowledge and education to the society and the people of Earth. That was not happening there. And also another violation by Mr. Cardone was that he then pursued business relationships with the people he met that day in Nashville, and as if it couldn't get any more ludicrous in this area of a fake Scientologist, he then goes and pretends to bring Scientology to Donald Trump. So that is my action-packed 30 minutes concerning Grant Cardone, and if you've ever dealt with him or watched any of his productions, you can make your own mind up about whether or not he is a con artist. I often think, I ask myself, how can we decide on life or describe mankind if we really don't agree all that much with each other? Mankind often is like a conglomeration of people that toy with one another, mistreat the youth, play with each other's minds. So all that is to say, please don't criticize L. Ron Hubbard unless you have actually looked at his books. He passed away in 1986. This is my religion, and it is a religion for millions of people around the world. I guess what I'm trying to tell you is, I think that if something has happened and there has been a con job for you personally, or, you know, somebody that you've watched talk about their problems inside a Church of Scientology, I wouldn't second guess the problems, because I think once a person gets to talking about publicly, they are usually fairly genuine for the most part. But I think also we should find out who really is doing that and who really is profiting, because that is the actual question that needs to be answered and remains unanswered. Thank you for tuning in.